Trina, if you'd like to get started, we are ready for you.
Perfect. All right. Well, let me adjust this to make sure you can see me. Perfect. So just kind of saying a quick introduction. I'm Katrina Kalwick. I am a marriage and family therapist, play therapist out in Grapevine. I have done a lot in domestic violence in the past, but now I work in private practice. So of course you still see domestic violence issues, but not in the same capacity. So today what I'm kind of talking about is, what we can be doing to help lower those rates. And, of course, unfortunately, there is domestic violence out there in general, but we're wanting to have it significantly lowered, especially in this time when we're seeing it actually go up. So I will share my screen real quick, but if for some reason you guys can't see it, just let me know. Perfect. Is that visible? I hope so.
Yes, we can see it perfectly. Thank you, Katrina.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to shift this over just a little bit, and then there we go. Okay. Wait, let's see. There we go. All right. So the first thing, I'm just going to very quickly go through, not really the causes, but why we're seeing more of this happening right now at this moment. So for people that wouldn't normally be kind of classified as an abuser, what we're seeing is like this stress that's coming in. I mean, globally, we have stress, right? We have anxiety as a culture, but also we're all contained now. And so even though we love our families, being around the same people over and over and over again for the past like 3 weeks or so, you're getting all of your buttons pushed. We're feeling angry. We're feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes we're having parents that are not used to staying home with their kids. And so what we're kind of seeing is that for some people in the past, they never would have had an issue with domestic violence or with abuse, but it's coming out at this point in time with them. The other side of things is we do have people that already in the past were abusers. And, this was more something about their power and control. And so the problem that we're seeing in this case is these kids are not able to be coming to school. So the people that normally might recognize, like, hey, this kid has had multiple bruises this week, I'm kind of wondering where these are coming from, or you're seeing this child has worn the same clothes 3 days out of this week, something's up. Well, we're not able to see that. And so we have less likely that the child is actually able to reach out and tell anybody about the abuse. There's less discovery, kind of like I said, you picking up and noticing that. This could be the abuser. They're under more stress than they have been in the past. And so maybe their abusive actions are actually magnified or greater than they have been. And of course, we know power and control is oftentimes that driving factor for abuse. So those are kind of some of the causes that we're looking at. Some, might be very obvious, but some you might be like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. Okay, hold on. Let me try to minimize this for a second so I can see what I wrote. There we go. So what we're trying to do is, I don't know how many of you have transitioned into telehealth at this point in time, but probably for a majority of you, that's the way that you are either connecting with your kids or you're connecting to families via phone or Zoom or email or whatever. So if you are doing sessions with kids, what we're trying to make sure is that you are really aware of any abuse that you might even potentially be seeing, that you're documenting that, not that you wouldn't have in the past, but we just might need to be a little bit more noticing things a little bit more than in the past. And so if you are seeing any kind of suspicious behavior or injuries, the other challenge is in the past, you might have easily been able to bring this child into your office to know that you're having a private conversation. But at this point, you might not really know if that's happening. And of course, just like in our office, there are times that we kind of know a child has been being coached by their parent to say something or to not say something. I actually just had that happen earlier on this week where, of course, I've seen it happen in the past, but, I was like, one of my kids flat out said, my mom told me not to tell you this. And I was like, great. But there are some things, that you want to be kind of keeping note of. Does this seem like it's really coming from the child's vocabulary? Are they flat out telling you, my mom said not to tell you this? So what we want to be kind of aware of is when we are doing teletherapy, that we are making sure that this child has a place when they can talk to us that is comfortable for them. And that is private for them. And so that we have already told the parents, we need some space, that they need to be in a different room, that their other siblings or anybody else in the family is also in a different room, so that this child really has their space to talk. So then the other thing is we're going to be teaching these parents these coping skills for themselves as well as for the kids. And so most likely, if most of us in here are, play therapists or school counselors or things like that, our kids are really the ones who come to us often as like that identified patient. But we all know that the whole family comes into play in that. And so sometimes being able to say to the parent, hey, I really need your help to be working on this at home, and giving them the material to do, especially in this setting when we can't be seeing them maybe to the same degree as what we have in the past. We can kind of empower the parent to be helping through this while also not trying to be sneaky, but giving the parent homework for themselves to be working on as well. Let's see. There we go. Okay, some of these things that we're trying to teach our clients right now is to try to make things flow better, that we're not getting on each other's nerves as much. One of those things to just keep people from being, less cranky with one another is we have to have balanced eating, exercise, sleep, screen time, things like that, which at this point in time, at least for most of the clients that I'm seeing, they're not having a really great balance of that right now. Kids are staying up until like 3 a.m. and then sleeping in, and parents don't really know what to do about that. There's a lack of exercise, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. People, you can probably see like on Facebook or other things, there's like tons of memes about like how much junk food people are eating right now. And I know that that's in some way how people cope, but it's not necessarily the most healthy coping skill. And so we're really wanting to make sure that people are trying to find a balance in all of this that will help to regulate them in general. So then we want to talk about emotional regulation. So we're teaching, that every emotion, positive, negative, whatever, all emotions are valid, but it's kind of what are you doing with that emotion? What's the action that comes along with that? And that every action is going to have a consequence. And some of those are positive consequences, good things happen. Others are negative consequences that happen. And so we want to be able to be diving into some of these emotions, especially right now with what we're talking about, with some of these negative things that can push people into being more abusive are things like anger, shame, fear, depression, which a lot of us are probably feeling at this moment. I know for myself, I can say, there's fear going on. There's fear. I don't want to, catch COVID-19. I don't want to somehow be somebody who transmits that to somebody else. I don't really know what's going to happen with my private practice. Telehealth is a new thing. I didn't used to practice telehealth. There's a lot of anxiety that can come up, but we have to know how do I deal with that? So an example of this would be like, anger. Okay, we can either come at it, the situation that we're feeling angry about, and come at it in an attacking way, which is just going to create defensiveness in the other person, is going to create a lot of challenges, and that's where abuse could happen. Or we could turn that and say, no, I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to discuss this. We're going to talk through whatever issue it is that we have, and we are going to come to a healthy conclusion. It was okay for me to have that original angry feeling, but then what am I doing with it? Another one could be fear. Fear, sometimes we're like, I just want to avoid it. I'm going to pretend it doesn't happen. I'm in denial. or I push myself away and away and away. Well, we have to jump into that and say, I'm sitting in that fear, but what can I control and what can't I control? What am I doing to help this situation? What do I have to just kind of let go of? And so being able to talk through all of these things is really important. And a lot of these kids or parents might need help negotiating between those things. We also need to make sure that our parents have an accurate expectation of this child's abilities. And so that can go in a few different directions. Some of these things could be, like a child ending up kind of being like this parentified child because this parent is saying, I have to work and you have to stay home. And so older sibling, you have to take care of these younger siblings. And we're putting them in a position that they're not actually capable of doing well because they're not in that mindset. They're not old enough. They're not mature enough. They may be doing their best, but it's not really appropriate for them to be doing that. There's other times too that it's this parent expects so much of their child, whether that's of behavior or, I expect them to clean their whole room, or I expect them, we have to remember that, depending on what age exactly we're talking about, this child can only live up to the expectations of what that child's age group can do. And we can't expect more than that. We can't expect them to be like just smaller adults. And so for some of our parents, that may be us as mental health professionals kind of teaching them, this is what is appropriate. This is maybe what's not appropriate. So stopping abuse. Of course, if there is any abuse happening in the house, we need to be looking for ways to stop that. And of course, where I say at the bottom, we are all mandated reporters, so it must be reported to CPS. Many of you have probably already had to do that in the past, but if not, I actually prefer doing online reporting. Just as a little quick tidbit, because I can print out everything that I wrote in. So I already have that in my case file. And also to me, it feels like it goes faster than doing a phone call. And usually they are going to call you back later on anyways. So if there's things that you need to be filling in to them, you'll often get a chance to do that later on. So report however you want, but that's my recommendation. So in stopping domestic violence and abuse, some of the things that we kind of need to be educating these people in is that domestic violence or abuse has many different forms. Sometimes people just think purely of like the physical abuse or of the sexual abuse. And those are kind of like our two main areas. But of course we have verbal abuse, which can be extremely harmful, which is one of those things that even though kids are not necessarily getting taken into hospitals to notice that this is happening, but our verbal abuse right now is spiking. Back to those things too, where everyone is kind of contained in one area and they're getting frustrated and buttons are getting pushed. And so things are coming out that shouldn't really be coming out. So that's something that we want to be looking at, but also we have the emotional abuse factor as well. So parents sometimes need to be educated that abuse is not just physical or sexual. In it, we have to change the attitudes and beliefs of the abuser and of the family in general. If not, this is going to happen again, just in a different scenario. The whole idea of, violence works. Unfortunately, violence sometimes works. And that's one of the things that backfires on us so often. And I'll say this in some of my other lectures that I do, like if I am a child and I'm running for a swing and my friend is also running for a swing, man, if I push her out of the way, I got the swing, yay. But of course that's wrong. That's bad. That's not how we need to be dealing with situations. But that's the same thing. My child was yelling, I smacked him, that shut them up. Well, that might have worked, but it didn't work. It's not what is appropriate, and it's not what we need to be teaching our children. It's not what we need to be, how we need to be reacting to situations. So the whole belief has to be shifted. And the idea of respect for every member of the family needs to be pushed into that, the whole family of origin of this is we all are important. And yes, of course, there may be kind of like that hierarchy of power in a family system, but everyone should be respected. So if, and I know we're not necessarily stressing today on if there's, a large abuse happening, but if abuse is happening, we need to come up with a safety plan. And here's 3 easy things that you can kind of put into the safety plan. Is the first is asking this child, what are some of the things that they've done in the past to protect themselves? This gives us a good baseline of, their skill set, what they've already used. We also want to empower them that they've had really good ideas in the past, some of which may have worked and some of which may not have worked. Then stepping into what are new plans that they can put in there for themselves. And this might be where you step in of, hey, have we tried this? What about that? And then that last one of who are the people that I can go to for help? This is important because they cannot do this all on their own. And I often want to have them physically write down the phone numbers or the addresses or how they can get in contact with these people, because we don't always know, in this day and age, there's so many times that you're like, yeah, I have their number plugged into my phone, but we don't know, is that phone going to be accessible to this client later on? Is that going to be something that's taken away when they're in the most danger of harm? Do they have access to that information? So I like to have all of this written down, or in a position that they know that they can get it whenever they need it. We have to empower these kids to know how to work through their feelings, learn new coping skills, as well as how to set their own boundaries for themselves. It's not okay for my parents to hit me. There are a lot of things out there that children don't always know how to set up those boundaries. And so we are here to help them and to reinforce those boundaries. So like I said, for this PowerPoint, I'm not really going to be focusing on people that have been active abusers in the past. What I'm more focusing on are people that, if we had looked a few months ago, you would have said this person would never abuse their child. They know how to handle situations, they're fine. But that at this point in time have begun to crack, and that's where abuse is starting to happen. So when I talk to parents, like I said, most of the time their child is the one who's the identified patient. So I have to make sure that however I'm talking to them, I'm sounding, of course, and I am being empathetic to them, not attacking them, and showing that I understand where they're coming from, while at the same time not being a pushover and just saying, oh yes, that's how you do it, keeping those boundaries that really need to be set there, and talking to them about what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So an example of this, could be, especially at this point in time, like, I understand that this time is really trying for you. We are all locked in our own houses. We don't have anywhere else to go. We don't really have that social network. You're not used to being at home with your kids for this long period of time. You've lost your job. You don't really know where your income is going to be coming in. You're scared of exposure. You're scared of what may happen to your elderly parents. And because of all of this, you feel like you're at the end of your rope. You feel very sensitive, and you feel like you're a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. But violence is not the answer. And I know some of you may use ACT. I actually call it FLO, like go with the flow, but the feelings, limits, options. That works on kids, but that also works on parents too. You going through, I understand where you're coming from, but violence is not the answer. So what is it that we can be doing instead? And helping them understand what options really are out there for them. So one thing that I always want to be teaching them is that fight, flight, freeze, and what happens with your brain. That, when we are put into those situations, which, back in caveman days, of course, that was like this tiger or this bear is chasing after you. All you have to do is get away. Your body is just wanting you to survive. So hair growth stops, digestion stops. Well, yeah, because we don't need that happening whenever we're just trying to get away with our life. But now you fast forward to nowadays, most of our challenges and when fight, flight, freeze is stepping up is for interpersonal conflict. But the same kind of thing happens. Parts of our body start shutting down. And one of those main ones that start shutting down is your frontal lobes in your brain, which is where all your upper level decision making comes into play. And so if somebody is getting into that fight, flight, freeze, and they're not able to de-escalate, they're eventually going to do or say something that's not typical of themselves, that maybe they don't really mean, or is an overreaction, or possibly could be abusive. And so we want to be teaching them, part of this is what your body is doing. And if you're not able to calm yourself down and use those coping skills, you're going to go off the other end. So we have to learn, how do I calm down? We need parents to know, how do I take breaks? How do I tag team? Because if we are already, it's kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back. If we're already under a lot of pressure, it may just take a little thing that all of a sudden we're like, oh, I can't deal with this anymore. And I know we don't always have the luxury that, we have two parents in the household. That's amazing when we do, or we have, grandparents or other responsible adults that we can, kind of tag team in with, but sometimes we don't. And so we have to think creatively. I actually had somebody earlier this week who is a single parent, and she was like, I don't know, I know that I'm losing it at times. I know that I don't know what to be doing. I'm so overwhelmed, and I had told her, I'm not really somebody who advocates for a lot of screen time for kids, but I said, if what you need in that moment is to say, I'm putting on Daniel Tiger, and my daughter's going to sit and watch that while I go take a quick break, yeah, I'd much rather her do that. And maybe she got more screen time than recommended that day. And not that I'm ever saying TV should be an excuse or, seen as another parent, because of course it's not. But we're also not living in a typical situation right now. And if I'm choosing between a little bit extra screen time or an explosive reaction, I'd much rather have that screen time. And that mom has time to go through her coping skills, bring herself back down, self-regulate, and then be able to proceed with the, working through whatever that challenge was that they were going through. And so we have to kind of remember some of what's going on is not what we would be doing in a typical everyday situation. And so some things may have to bend with that. We have to know that we have to be under control of ourselves before we start disciplining a child. And so, of course, we typically, when a fight breaks out or, we're having this argument and, the parent is like, okay, I'm laying down the ground rules, or here's the consequence that comes into play. That's great. We need consequences. But if this parent has lost control of themselves and then they're trying to deal out consequences, like I said, our frontal lobes aren't working properly at that point in time. And so these consequences may become extreme. And so we need to be doing this in a stable position rather than out of a reactionary position. We have to have clear, consistent, loving, but firm boundaries and limits. And at this point in time, like I said, we're in a different position than we have been in the past. And so it's very easy for us to kind of say, like, some of our previous limits have to be adjusted, and that's okay. Some of this may be trial and error as you're figuring out what to be doing, but we need to be as consistent as possible, and we need to be able to be willing to explain why we have a limit and why it's there in place for our children to understand, on one end why that has to be, but on the other end, and when it's typically these limits are things that they're not happy with, we want them to understand we have a reason. It's not just because, or because I'm the mom. There really are reasons of why we have to set these boundaries up. And I know for some for a lot that I'm seeing, especially in teens, is the teens are wanting to go out and go see their friends, and parents are saying no. Well, of course, we don't want to be spreading anything. We want to make sure that our household is safe and that things aren't getting brought back in. But sometimes parents are just saying, well, I'm just saying no. Well, no. We need to be processing through that so that this child not only understands for now why this would not be okay for them to do, but also this is a learning process for them, so that when they're setting up boundaries in their future, they know why a boundary is set. We need to know what are acceptable punishments and what are not. So of course, I'm not ever recommending a violent consequence, for a few reasons. One, it's very, I just think it's wrong, but also, it's very confusing. I go and hit my sister and then I get hit for hitting my sister and said, don't hit your sister. Well, that's really confusing. Also, like I said, a lot of these, when we're under this pressure, sometimes these reactions might be bigger than what we think that they are. And so the consequence might be bigger than it really needed to be. So we want to be looking at nonviolent discipline. So this could be things like timeout or restrictions on technology, things like that. But one thing that I would say, especially when we're kind of talking about technology right now, in the past, it may be really easy to say, hey, you're grounded from your phone for a week because you chose to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas at this point in time, that phone might be the only way that your child's able to socially connect with others. So I'm not saying that that phone can never be taken away, but we might need to be keeping those kind of aspects in mind, because if we are setting them up to not have any social interaction, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure and setting them up for failure in a way, because that's a need that we all have. And they're not going to have other ways to get it other than going outside of the house or doing something that they're not allowed to do, like sneaking that phone or something. So we wanted to see if we can try to find consequences that don't limit other needs. We need our parents to really know what resources are out there to help them. So that may be like having them talk to other parents, talking to you, looking up. There's a lot of websites out there that are so helpful that they can use. Just knowing what is out there, and sometimes they need that psychoeducation. Finding yes or the compromise. There's a lot of things that have to be no right now. No, you can't go outside and play with your friends. No, we can't, the X, Y, and Z. There's so many no's that are happening, and people are feeling confined. And so if we can find those things that we can say yes to, it might not be, yes, you can go outside and play with your friend, but what we can do is we can FaceTime your friend and we can play a game together, and we'll figure out a good way to do that, or whatever. But finding the things that either can feel like a compromise or feel like a yes. At times, like I said, parents kind of feel like they're bringing their child in as the main issue of why they come to see you. And we know that the whole family system is involved. And so these are great times that whenever we are working through anything with the child, that we also want to be working through those same things with the parents. So I ask the parents to help their child learn how to regulate their feelings, their behaviors, by having the parent model these things for the child. So we know, like, if kids are seeing good behavior, they are going to try to model that same good behavior. And so again, not that I'm trying to be like, ha ha ha, I'm being sneaky with these parents, but sometimes if it's set more in a guise of like, these are techniques that help your child, but I want you to be doing them with your child so that you can be helping them learn. Well, the parent is going to be learning these things too. And so it really can, it can deal with less confrontation, because sometimes parents don't want to feel called out that they're doing the wrong thing, and less resistance, because like, yes, of course I want to do everything that I can to help my child. Great. So I need you to be working on these things too. We also have seen that many, many studies show that there's a connection to a child's level of anxiety or anger issues or depression to their primary caregivers. And actually, a lot of these studies show it specifically to their mothers, but more research is needed, of course. But so if the parent is dealing with their own anxiety, oftentimes the child is now dealing with anxiety. So if we are working, we kind of have to work that backwards too. If we're trying to help this child with their anxiety, we need to be helping the parents with theirs too. And kind of talking about that correlation can help parents be more on board with working on things on their own. So I said, like, I asked the parent to model some healthy behavior. And I had said that I would try to put in a lot of activities for you guys to physically just take home with you. And I believe that this can be sent out to you afterwards. So you should be able to have access to the PowerPoint. And I think there's also a recording that you might be able to have access to. So hopefully all of these are things that you can really be utilizing. So the first activity that I would have is for the family to be making either a family expectation document or a family contract. If I was doing this in my office, I would have gotten out like a big sheet of butcher paper or like those huge sticky note kinds for everyone to kind of be writing on this together. And so what we're wanting to put in this are, what are the rules that we're having right now? And especially right now that things are different, there are different rules happening right now than there would have been a few months ago. What are the privileges? What are the consequences? What are the expectations? How all of these things, how do they affect the family? And I want everyone's input in this. So I don't want it just to be that mom and dad have written down, here's the rules of our family, everyone has to agree to it. What I'm wanting is everyone kind of coming together and talking about it, and so some of those things might be needing to be expanded a little bit. So, one child might say, well, don't be mean. Cool, great. I definitely want that in this contract. Let's talk about that. What does it mean to be mean? What do we not want to see? What are, and so that the parents can kind of be, as they're writing all of this down, we're also talking through it. But parents have to be open that some of these things that the kids say might be about them too. Like, mom and dad, no yelling. Remember that family contract that we did? Mom and dad are yelling right now. We said that we weren't going to do that. We want this to be something that all of these rules are applying to the family in general. And at the end of that, I want everyone to sign it. And oftentimes I might put at the bottom, like, this is, our contract until we decide to make a new one, or this is our contract until quarantine is over, or whatever, so that we know that this is a kind of living document. This is something that we can adjust. We can add things if we want. But of course, it's something that we all have to kind of agree to as we're adding. This also, when we're talking about that idea of everybody is respected in the family, this is actively showing everybody's voice is being heard. The next thing would be to create a daily schedule. A lot of us, and especially kids, really do well with knowing what's going to happen next. It helps to reduce our anxiety, and having a schedule kind of gives us that idea of like, okay, I know what I need to be doing next, or I know what's kind of expected of me. Back when I had said, like, we're wanting to make sure that we're regulating, well, what's our sleep cycle like? What is our eating habits like? Are we getting enough exercise? Having a schedule can help with that, because then we aren't staying up until 4 a.m. and sleeping in until 2. We know what is kind of expected. And, this is just a typical little schedule here, but that can be made to whatever fits the needs of your client or your family. But, making sure that you're putting in some of those things like creative time. We really need that. And it shouldn't just seem like it's just focused on, because I've had some parents that'll say, like, okay, schoolwork is right here, and things that, not that I want to say schoolwork is bad, because of course schoolwork is great, but kids might perceive that as like, oh, okay, I have to do my schoolwork here. Oh, I have to do my chores right here. I want things that kids are excited for to be listed in this schedule as well. And so creative time might be one of those. Active time outside, FaceTime with your friends, all of that getting put in there. And of course, for some schedules, we can be more flexible. And for other kids, they need it to be pretty more on that rigid side, because it makes them feel safe. But that consistent routine can really help make a safe, predictable environment. And it also, for adults, can sometimes feel like you are, controlling some of the chaos that you're feeling. There's a lot of things right now that are completely out of our control. And so when you are able to line up a few things that you're like, whew, okay, I did that. I was able to control this in this moment, can be very helpful. So this one, I draw a lot of activities for my kids. So this is one, I drew it, so I know it's not necessarily like the best graphic right there, but this is kind of this watch your words activity. So at the top, I have, this brain and like a light bulb to be like, what is your thought? Because we're going to have many, many thoughts out there, of course. And thoughts are not necessarily good or bad. They just kind of are. So I would have the child, maybe I can do this a few different ways. I could have them write it directly on this paper, or sometimes we do kind of note cards, and you might write the thought on the top, but then on one side you write what you should do, and then flipped on the other side you say what maybe you shouldn't do. But we have these two arrows that go down to the say it side or the don't say it side. So an example of that might be, I see my sister playing with my favorite Barbie. My first reaction, and what might go into that don't say it category, is, give me that, that's mine. And you scream and you yell and you snatch that back out of your sister's hand. Well, the thought, that's my Barbie, that's an accurate thought. And it is my Barbie, and she should have had permission. But that reaction and how I say, what I do to use my words and, my actions along with it are not appropriate. So then I kind of go back to, well, what could I say in that moment? I could go up to her and say, that's my Barbie. I really wish that you would have asked permission to play with it. I'm going to need that back. Or maybe you might say that you're going to share, but you'd really rather them ask permission next time, or whatever, but whatever that is, we have a healthy way of saying it and we have an unhealthy way of saying it. And so again, this can be used very easily for any age kids. You can modify this, but we also want our parents to be doing this too. And so our parents to be modeling this exact same activity. What thought did you have? How did you express that thought? Did it go into the side that you should have said, or is this more on the side of like, I probably should have said that differently? Or, sometimes we do also have thoughts that don't require something to be said. Kind of like, that if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. There are some thoughts that we have that they pop into our head, but it's not really nice to say. We want to filter that so that we're not saying them. So like I said, adults can use this, of course, too. And so if we're asking our parents to be modeling this same thing for our kids, that will be a great setup for them. There are so many activities that we can be doing with the Inside Out characters. I love Inside Out. A lot of people have Disney Plus, so it's easy to ask our kids to watch it, but I also always have a DVD of this in my office that I loan out, because it's a great way for kids to have a way to label, I'm feeling sad, just like sadness. I'm feeling angry, like anger. My head is like exploding with rage. Using these and having parents use this, like giving them the assignment, hey, watch this movie, and then I want you guys to all talk about your feelings. Then later on, whenever topics are coming up, we can use these as examples. And if you go out and, I didn't want to put in too many things because, you guys can go out and look for things, but, there's so many activities that you can be doing as Inside Out characters. Even like some of them can be like playing Uno, and every time you pull up those cards, of course there's no purple for fear, but you can be using the wilds as fears, or you can kind of adjust it to something else. There's so many ways that you can use these characters to try to express feelings and to talk about those feelings. And for some of these parents or some of these families, feelings might not be something that they typically talk about. Some families try to stuff those away, like, don't feel them. Don't even talk about this. Others, it might be like, I have this big feeling, but I don't really know what to do with it. So it just kind of like, goes everywhere. We're wanting them to use these as vocabulary of what can we be talking to each other about in all of these. So this activity is from I think Hub for Helpers. It's a free activity that if you guys are looking for resources, feel free to go and use that. But talking to your kids as well as parents of like, how are they taking time out when they're feeling overwhelmed? What coping skills can they use? So in this particular one, they can roll a die and then they look at that category and say, okay, this is a coping skill I think I could use. I think I might try, I haven't used before, or this one, I don't think it's going to help me. It's okay to find things that you're like, yep, that doesn't really work for me. Okay, so we learned that doesn't work, but something is going to work. And so we have to find which one will work. But in any situation, and this is like when kids are working on schoolwork, sometimes they need to take a quick break to say like, okay, got to refocus myself. When we're feeling frustrated, which especially when we're talking about how reactions can kind of become abusive, we want people to be able to say, I need to take a break for a few minutes. And especially, if you ever read Dr. Gottman's work, we know that when we're getting elevated, if we've gone off that deep end, we need at least 20 minutes for our heart rate to de-escalate, for us to come back to our center. And so finding these things that you can be doing while you're taking that break is really important. And so, I always ask people to put in their own ideas too. What works for one person might not work for another. We can be offering up our ideas, but we also want our kids and our parents to be offering up their own ideas. What are ways that they can use as coping skills? And in that, we should be seeing that reduction of angry outbursts. We should be seeing more self-control, or at least more self-soothing. If you felt like, I didn't really get to control myself, but I could soothe myself back down before something bad happened. We need our kids to be more active. So that is one of the problems that we are seeing with everyone feeling very contained. For most kids, they can't do their normal activities, which might have been like going to play soccer or baseball or going to the park and the playground to play. Like those are all roped off and all those activities are closed down. And some kids might be able to say they can go to their backyard or front yard to play. Some might not, like especially in apartment complexes, there may be some grassy areas that they can go, but that might not be open for everyone. And so we have to be thinking of creative ways to still let these kids be active. And what I've actually seen is this is one of the biggest problems that I'm having with this is actually for our teens and preteens, because what they did that was active normally were group sports, and how they're perceiving it right now is like, color guard is closed. I can't do that. Football is closed or baseball is closed. Like it's this kind of all or nothing setting, rather than, I could probably go and practice a little bit outside, or I could, go and do something else. And so they're becoming very sluggish, and you're having a lot of that. I mean, like if you kind of think about for yourself, if you've been sitting, at least I know for me, if I've been sitting for too long, it's like internally I'm like, okay, I'm getting jittery, or I feel that need to go out and do something. Well, when we're feeling that pressure and then something else sets us off, because you forgot to take the garbage out. Well, I'm already feeling this pressure. And so it's really easy to explode, rather than like, yeah, I did need to take the garbage out. So one of the things that I put on here was, I don't know if you guys are seeing it, but not that I'm saying everything on TikTok is great, of course not, but there are TikTok challenges happening right now for parents to be doing TikTok dances with their kids. To me, I'm like, that's perfect. That's something that you guys can do as a family. It gets you active. You got to learn the dance. You got to try it a few times. And it's something that can create lasting memories. So, our parents recognizing that these kids need to have that energy outlet and need to be doing something, where at the same time, like I said, we need the parents to be doing something. Parents might have said like their exercise was going to the gym. Okay, you can't be going to the gym right now, so what are you doing? Well, I sent my kids out to play, but I haven't done anything. Okay, so when we're talking about modeling for our children, all of these activities I'm asking for the parents to be doing as well. One other thing that I tell parents, even before all of this, when you have like overactive kids, if you have stairs or you have something like that, build an obstacle course for them to be going through. Have them go run up and down the stairs 5 times. Have them go, I don't know, some people are like, you can't jump on the couch, you can't, but like have something that can be like a crash pad for them to jump on. Some of these kids have a lot of energy. And if the parents view that energy as chaos, oh my gosh, my kid is running around the living room going crazy, I'm at my wit's end, Well, the child's need was, I need to be exerting this energy. Well, if we can funnel that into something that is deemed appropriate in the parent's eyes, I've created this obstacle course for them to go run. Now it doesn't seem like chaos anymore. There's a point to it. And, where we said we can't be controlling everything out in the world right now, and there's a lot that feels like we can't control, having a few little things that are controlled in a positive way can really be beneficial to our children, but also to our adults. So here are some modulation cards. This is if you have gotten, and I want to say I got this from the teletherapy, let me think of what it's called, Teletherapy and Activities and Support, which is a Facebook group. If you haven't joined that, or if you're not interested in that, that's okay. But if you haven't joined that, I recommend it, because all of us have really been trying to share our activities with one another, because at this point in time, a lot of us have not been teletherapy counselors. And so it's really helpful to kind of have ideas and share all of that. But that's where I got this one from. But I think it's great of looking at things when I'm feeling angry. What can I do instead of having a big reaction? So like I said, this is for our kids, but I want all of our parents to be using these as coping skills as well. None of them are, inherently childish. An adult could, even though the pictures look fun and kind of draw you in as a kid, these are exercise I'd be asking my adults to do as well. So, I'll let you kind of look at it, but sometimes people are more auditory learners, so I'll just kind of say them quickly. We have the turtle technique, which is when you pull your head towards your body, and you can pull it this way as well. Bounce back from your feelings, bounce or throw or play with a ball. Count backwards from 25. Tense and then relax your fists. Breathing. So this one is breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, then breathe out for 4 seconds. Exercise, do jump ropes, do jumping jacks. Have a seat. Just trying to calm yourself and sit down can be helpful when you're really angry. If you need to punch a pillow, I have my kids, sometimes you have like bop bags or things like that, but especially at home, I will make sure that I'm saying, people are not for hitting, but this pillow that we've set up, yep, that is for hitting. Go to town on that, because sometimes we really need that physical release. Tear paper. Sometimes kids are needing something that and of course adults too, but they're needing something that feels destructive. And so ripping up paper or ripping up cardboard or egg cartons can be a really, really good way of just feeling like you're getting that out. Coloring, anything that kind of has a brush stroke like this is very calming. Later on, it does say like pet an animal, that not just any random animal, but that's also the same thing. It's very soothing just to kind of continuously have those strokes. And of course, with an animal, you're feeling loved in that situation too. Chewing gum, having that repetitious motion, taking a shower or a bath. Sometimes that can just make you feel, it's self-care, but it also can soothe you. Writing, some people are really big journalers, that can help. Talk to a trusted adult or friend. Ragdoll and robot, tightening all your muscles and then relaxing all your muscles. You can also do a progressive muscle tightening as well if you want to get deeper into that. Go take a walk, especially, and some of these might be things that you can choose on your own, but if a child needs that, asking their parents, can we go take a walk together? That also gets you out of the house and gets you doing something different.
Hey, Katrina,
yes.
This is Sandy. We're about at the 10-minute mark. It's actually more like 7 minutes. I know you wanted a heads up when we get closer to the noon time. So it's about 7 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm going to quickly run through the rest of these, but just get a drink, take a nap, draw, color, dance. Dancing can be really helpful. Singing, making a craft. That's one big thing I'm asking a lot of parents to do with their kids. It shifts your mindset over when you're able to be creative. Read a book, listen to music. This is one that I also will ask kids to make a playlist, especially my older kids. Make a playlist of feeling songs. Like when I'm in a bad mood, I want to listen to this, because now they have access to that too. Pet an animal, write a story, or create your own. Breathing techniques that I use with a lot of my kids. I do these as 3 Bs. So bumblebee, belly, and bubble breathing. So bumblebee breathing is like when you make that buzzing sound. So it could be like bzzz, or it could be, you can keep your lips closed and it's kind of like that om sound, like when you think about yoga, and that more buzzes in your nose. Well, that can stimulate a lot of things, especially like in your head and in your brain. That can be really focusing, and actually is one of the reasons why you do like maybe say om in yoga. Belly breathing, of course, we're trying to shift over the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. And so instead of breathing within your chest, that would stimulate your sympathetic nervous system. We're breathing through our diaphragm. So it's kind of cool to let kids see their belly breathing in and out. Well, of course, this is what we're needing our parents to be doing too. And then bubble breathing is learning how to do those slow breaths. So if they really do have bubbles, that's awesome. If not, I just say pretend like it. And because when you blow a bubble, if you blow it fast, it's going to pop. But if you blow slow, you're able to blow a nice big bubble. And so you have kids kind of practicing with that. This is one that if you guys have ever seen The Art of Social Work, you can go to that website and there's a lot of things that you can do there. For this, it's a little dragon, and you're writing on the next page has where you write those things that you're feeling angry about, and you tape it to the dragon's mouth, and this dragon can pretend like this dragon is blowing that fire out and kind of just letting go of that anger. You know, this is a physical representation, but then as this child is working through things, they can practice that. You know, I have one, it's really cute whenever they're like blowing out their anger, they're kind of like, you know, like they really act like they're that dragon, but now they've had a way to release that. If parents can be using that same thing, or even using that as vocabulary of like, okay, let's let out our dragon breath. Parents, you let out your dragon breath too. You are showing these kids how to do this. And within all of that, you're letting your anger levels drop, you're coping through that. And so then in turn, you're not reacting to situations, and that is then lowering the chance of abuse. We want to make sure that we're having a daily self-care plan. I couldn't find a picture that had all the categories that I wanted, but you know, we're wanting to make sure that we're having the physical, emotional, mental, social, and spiritual needs met. And so even just creating a little list for yourself, checking it off. Did we get all of those things met? And it may be harder for younger kids to recognize all of these, but especially for our adults, they can be checking some of those off for their children. You know, did I give them access to doing all of these things? But they need to be checking those off for themselves. Am I dealing with this self-care? Have I been running ragged and so I've had no social life whatsoever because I've been focused on everything else? Oh, maybe that's why I'm overreacting to some of these other situations. Maybe that's why I screamed at my kids the other night, because I don't feel like I'm having all of my needs met. How can I address those so that in turn, I'm not overreacting? So that is the end of all of that. I know I wanted to give you a few minutes to kind of ask questions if needed. Since I have never done a Zoom meeting like this before, normally I get to like talk in front of everyone so I get a chance. I'm not exactly sure how we want to do the Q&A, but I'm available for that for anybody who needs that.
Hey, Katrina, we're going to have people drop things into the chat. Right now we have one question. Someone is saying, you know, our parents are already so overwhelmed with schoolwork, working from home, you know, there's going to be a lot of reluctance because they're already stretched very thin. So kind of what is your suggestion to help, you know, get this information out to families that are already on the edge? You know, with so much going on, how do we get this out without overwhelming in the process?
Right. Well, and that's a really good question, because, you know, we're seeing what we're looking at are these families that are so overwhelmed and feel like there's so much pressure. And so it kind of depends. Like I'd say, hopefully, you know, the person that you're talking to, you might know what are things that can kind of drive them. You know, for some of them, like they might be saying, oh my gosh, there's so much going on at schoolwork, it's piling up. I'd kind of say, well, let's look at this as kind of like it's also schoolwork. It's just as important as getting these other things done. But let's look at the ones that we think are easily achievable at the beginning, rather than one of the ones that maybe feels a little bit more complicated. And once they get a few wins under their belt, they are going to buy into it more than if they were given something that seemed either too much or seemed like this activity is not going to work for me or whatever. Starting them off with something that you think would be achievable. Also talking to them about some of these activities, even though you have to dedicate time and effort and work and sometimes money into buying something or whatever, knowing that the idea of it is to relieve pressure. And so if even though we had to put effort into relieving that pressure, we're looking for the future things becoming easier. And so that's something that I also kind of will try to stress to them.
Wonderful. One of the thoughts that I have too, thinking from the school counseling perspective is that, when we were face-to-face, we were required to provide, parent education meetings, and we know they weren't always, visited the way we would like them to be or attended the way we would like them to be. But I think, now that we're adjusting to this new virtual world, that we should be doing small kind of parent webinars, maybe it's a 5-minute, here's a tip, and model it for them and show them in a 5-minute quick video, 3 to 5 minutes, to get the information out too. I think we've gotten into the habit of just posting links or sending this, but I know the power of a short video clip. A lot of parents that get this message on their phone are going to look at it, click on it, hit play, and maybe, we're saving a life. So we should be remembering that just because we've gone virtual doesn't mean all of the other things have stopped. The things that we normally do to bridge some of this hopefully is continuing or getting there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's so important that, and things are not normal. And so I'm not going to ever act like it's completely normal right now. But for our own mindset and then for our parents, we're trying to make things feel as normal as possible. And so getting back to doing some of the things that we're like, we typically would have done this anyways. It might have been in a different setting, but we would have been doing this anyways. And I think where I had said why I kind of picked some of these activities that are geared more towards children, but I want the parents to be doing it too. I feel like there's oftentimes a lot of resistance for parents trying to work on something on their own, but that they'd be willing to do something for the betterment of their children. And so when you kind of put it in that way, they're more likely to do it. If it was, we normally would have been having this meeting anyway, so we're going to gear this meeting towards X, Y, and Z. Here's a quick little snippet because I know we're all busy. It gives them that information.
Great. Katrina, I have a question for you, and this is something that's come up several times since we've transitioned to virtual world counseling and support, and it goes along with kind of the CPS issues. Mm-hmm. As we, as counselors and teachers are having Zoom sessions or having, Google Classrooms and interacting with students virtually, are they looking for the same things that they always have for reporting for reporting, CPS abuse and things like that? I mean, in my opinion, and that's why I'm asking yours, in my opinion, we're going to continue to report anything that we notice that may seem questionable in any way. If I have a little inkling that it could be questionable, we're going to report to CPS. But is there anything that counselors, educators should be looking for as they are doing these, face-to-face lessons or counseling or whatever it is that they're interacting with the student and family with?
Right. Well, and that's one, because like I said, it's harder now because there may be some things that you would have picked up on that you can't pick up on in the same way. And so, yes, I think reporting everything that seems suspicious because, and I even tell parents, because sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I'm letting you know I had to make this CPS report, or on the other hand, when you're like, oh, I don't think CPS will investigate this, but it needs to be out there, at least it's gotten put into a file. And so if nothing comes about it, okay, at least it got put into a file so that if this becomes a predictable behavior next year, it's already been documented before. What you're kind of looking for, especially at the beginning, it's kind of hard because you don't know how people typically react over telecommunication. I know how they reacted to me in my office, but this is different. And so sometimes kids might be more hesitant or things like that. And we don't want to just jump to conclusions of like, something's wrong with them. Well, no, they just think it's weird talking to their counselor over the computer. But noticing, like, are we seeing, of course, if you're seeing physical situations, like bruises or things like that. But like I said, I've already had a child tell me that their parent did something that they weren't supposed to do and that the parent told them not to tell. So of course that had to be reported. But for other things, you can kind of sometimes see they're concealing something, or one of the big challenges that what we're having is you don't know if you're actually alone with that child or not. I have had, actually, there was one parent, I could see their reflection in a mirror that was behind the client. And so I had to be like, Mom, I need you to give us some space. But the parents kind of overlooking, well, if it seems like the child is talking to you, but then they kind of keep glancing this way, recognizing, okay, are they trying to tell me something that they're worried somebody else is listening? Are they worried? Is it the opposite? Are they supposed to be telling you something that maybe isn't accurate, but mom wanted them to say this? I think that's the privacy is a big issue when we're also talking about, like, what are we picking up on? To, sometimes, it's not our sole job to be investigators for child abuse, but we still are looking for those. We have to be, because it may be saving a life.
Thank you. All right, Katrina, I'm gonna stay on for a little bit longer. We can catch up in a minute. Everyone else is on the line. We are done with today's session, but I am gonna gather the resources. If Katrina's willing to share her slide deck, which I think she is, we will post that online, and the recording. It usually takes me about 24 hours to get that up, but if I can do it a little sooner, I will. So please be patient. It'll go up on my website, and I will also email it to you. So anyone who's registered will get that direct email. And if you've been in any of my previous sessions, I've sent everything out as promised. So just give me a little bit of time and we'll get this out there. I'll also get out the monthly webinar schedule for April. I think you're going to find a lot of great resources and supports to help school counselors get through this pandemic. So thank you again, everyone. I'm so appreciative for those that came. Thank you, Katrina. This was an incredible session. Really gave us a lot to think about and how we're planning and supporting parents and students. And I look forward to seeing some of you at Family Yoga at 2:30. Y'all have a great day. And Presley, if you want to go ahead and stop recording.